Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking Commander, and specifically we're going to be talking about Haymakers. Now what is a Haymaker? A Haymaker is the one card in the deck that when you cast it, catches you up if you're behind, or pushes you over the edge if you're about to win. The Haymaker is normally the highest CMC card in the deck, but I always run one so that no matter what, I'm always still in the game. Also, these aren't to be confused with win conditions. For example, Crater Hoof Behemoth isn't on this list because that's a win condition for a deck with a load of creatures. When you cast it, it does normally win you the game, but without those creatures, it doesn't really do much by itself. These are cards that catch you up and do a lot of stuff just by themselves with the one card. Same with board wipes. There are no just specific board wipes on this list because board wipes reset things to a point of evenness, and normally your opponents get to play their spells before you, so you'll still end up slightly behind. And then in that same vein, Cyclonic Rift is not on this list. Cyclonic Rift is not a Haymaker. It's a win condition if you're ahead, and if you're behind and you just do it, it generally means that you're not going to win. It just means everyone kills you out of spite because you're the one who cast Cyclonic Rift. And this is also just my list, this is my personal preference. These are cards that I have played and I've done well with. If you feel I've missed any or you don't agree with the order, let me know in the comments below and we can have a chat and see what everyone else likes. And maybe there'll be a part 2, I guess. So starting off in the number 10 spot, we have one people may not have heard of, Vicious Shadows. Vicious Shadows is 6 and a red for a enchantment. Whenever a creature dies, you may have Vicious Shadows deal damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. Now this card is low on the list because it doesn't catch you up immediately. Why it's on the list is because if this is left unanswered, the amount of damage this card can do is obscene. The person winning the game of Commander will often have either the most creatures or will have the most cards in hand. This card is a Haymaker because it completely changes the board state to work against the person who is winning and allows you to catch up. Also, the fact it says whenever any creature dies, target player is dealt damage equal to the number of cards in their hand means that it doesn't have to be the person who's winning whose creatures die. It could be your creatures, it could be another player's creatures. What this card does is it changes the dynamic of the game. It allows people to team up. I can attack one of the other players, we can trade off some small creatures and then deal a ton of damage to the player who is winning. And I know this card may not look like a Haymaker, especially compared to some of the ones later on in the list. However, trust me, from playing this card, it is great. The first time you play it, keep track of how much damage it does, just casually by the side, and you will see why it's worth including in a deck. At number 9, we have Rite of Replication. Rite of Replication is 2 blue for a sorcery, create a token that's a copy of target creature. It also has Kick of 4. If this spell was kicked, create 5 of those tokens instead. Does your opponent have a good creature? Would you like 5 of them? This card brings you back and gives you an immediate board state and an immediate presence. You get 5 of whatever the best creature is on the board. If that best creature is legendary, okay, you only get 1, but then you're only spending 4 mana to do it. This card is great because it immediately gives you a presence. You can go from having nothing on board to having 5 of whatever the best thing around is. And it also doesn't slouch if you're winning, because then you get 5 of whatever your best creature is. There's a reason why this card's been printed in 2 separate Commander products after its original printing, because it just does work. And it doesn't even have to be in a token matter shell, something like Brooderclad or things like that. It can just catch you up really quickly, and this is a great example of a Haymaker. Coming in at number 8, we have a card that I love, not because it is Sultai and I'm a man with 6 Sultai decks, but because it's obscenely powerful and is a ton of fun. For you, anyway. You will have a ton of fun with this. Number 8 is Villainous Wealth. Villainous Wealth is X, black, green, blue for a sorcery spell. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of spells with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. So this is a card that you want to dump a lot of mana into. If you can get X to be like 7 or 8, then it's highly likely you're going to hit something good. I've seen people put 20 or 30 into this, and then that gets a bit obscene, because you're basically just taking a large portion of your opponent's deck and sticking onto the battlefield under your control. This is a Haymaker because no matter when you cast this, it sets you so far ahead of anyone else on the board. Generally speaking, I like to pick the player who's winning, if that's not me, and just take a ton of their cards and their best stuff. If it's less clear who's winning, I generally go for whoever's deck I think will have the most permanents, because instant and sorceries off this are kind of cool, but by hitting creatures, it just gives you that board state and just gives you that presence immediately. It's also one that I probably wouldn't recommend playing over Zoom or any of the webcam style things, because doing this is a lot of faff. Also, from experience, when I've had this spell cast against me, shockingly, I have then gone on to lose the game. But when your opponent is killing you with your best cards, you've also kind of won a little bit. You've at least morally come second, if that makes sense. The main reason this card is a bit lower on the list is because it's 3 colors, so it can't go in as many decks. So at number 7, we have our only creature on the list, but what a creature it is. We have Zakama, Primal Calamity. Zakama is 6 red, green, white for a legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. Zakama is a 9/9 with Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. When Zakama enters the battlefield, if you cast it, untap all lands you control. It has 3 activated abilities, 2 in a red, Sakama deals 3 damage to target creature, 2 in a green, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and 2 in a white, you gain 3 life. So this big lad does everything. If there's creatures you need to deal with, it will at least let you do 9 damage to them, spread about as you choose. If there's a pesky enchantment or artifact that's holding you down or winning an opponent in the game, you can deal with it immediately. Or if you're right on the edge of dying, you can bring yourself back from the brink. You can give yourself that 9 life. Also, people will forget it has reach. I mean, it's a massive dinosaur with 3 heads. Kind of assumed it might have reach, but it definitely does, which is fantastic. Now this is our only creature on the list because it's going to be more easily dealt with than any of the other of these Haymakers. However, he slices, he dices, he does everything that you want. And he also hits like a truck for a ton of damage by himself. If he comes down, everyone's going to be thinking twice about attacking you. The activated abilities, also you don't have to do them immediately. You untap all your lands, but they can be activated at any point, including on your opponent's turns. So this is a great deterrent because it's kind of like, get away from me. The Sakama is great. The main sticking point with this is obviously how much it costs. I don't mean mana cost, I mean the money side of things. I've tried to keep the cards on this list not super expensive, but Sakama's probably up there with one of the more expensive ones, because it also can be a commander, which means there's a lot of want and interest in this card. But if you're running a Naya deck and you have one available, I would put it in. I think it's awesome. At number 6, we have our first mono green spell. We're talking Genesis Wave. Genesis Wave is X green 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 for a sorcery. Reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto your battlefield into the graveyard. Do you not have a board state? Would you like a board state? Cast Genesis Wave for as much mana as you can. I've seen this card be cast for 50 before. That is obscene. It's the equivalent of just taking your deck and just throwing it onto the battlefield and like, okay, cool, here we go. This card is spectacular with Enter the Battlefield effects because they all come in at the same time, so you can choose how you trigger them. This can get a bit complicated, but it generally means you're going to catch up a lot and you're going to do something awesome in the coming turns because you just have instant board state. Why this is higher up than Villainous Wealth is because you know the cards you're putting in your deck, so you have a better idea of what you're going to get. It's also mono green, so it goes in more decks, it's more flexible. So this card is surprisingly good earlier in the game as well. Even if X is only 3 or 4, it still lets you hit land drops and it still gets you a board state. And importantly as well, it doesn't exile itself once in the graveyard, it's just there. If you hit an Eternal Witness later on in the game, or something that brings the spell back, you can then cast it for later. So there's nothing better than casting Genesis Wave twice, or 3, or 4 times in the game, depending on how you build it. It's a really dumb card that can really put you ahead very, very quickly. So at number 5, this may be a bit of a surprise, especially considering we just had a different big green spell. At number 5, I have Finale of Devastation. Finale of Devastation is X green green for a sorcery. Search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, and put it onto the battlefield. If you searched your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X and gain haste until end of turn. So for anyone wondering why this is ahead of Genesis Wave and why Crater Hoof Behemoth isn't on the list, it's because this card is on the list. This card is a Crater Hoof Behemoth and a Genesis Wave combined into one. Although it only gets you one creature, it gets you the creature. It gets you the best thing that you need for that particular moment. If you're casting this for 12, it's highly likely that you win the game there. Cast this, go and get a token maker with it. They all come down, they all have +10/+10, they all swing that turn. Everything gets haste. So like Sakama, the main drawback of this card is actually how much it costs in cash value to buy in the first place. This card isn't so cheap. It's not stupidly expensive, but it's not like a budget card. However, this one goes in a lot of decks, not just for its Haymaker value, but for its utility. If you need a Reclamation Stage to blow up an enchantment early, cast it, get it out of the way, and do it. But the fact that when you cast this late at game for the Haymaker value is the reason why it's number 5 on this list. This card is obscene. At number 4, we have our first mono black card. We have Rise of the Dark Realms. Rise of the Dark Realms is 7 black for a sorcery, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. So in Commander, people play board wipes. They keep the game controlled and keep everything nice and even. What is the best way to break that symmetry? You take everything back. All of the creatures come back under your control. It's very rare by the time you cast this that you are not going to get at least 9 mana's worth of value out of it. If you have this in your hand as well, you can pick off their best creatures. Your removal spell becomes permanent threatens. You can cherry pick the best creatures from around the board that you want because you know in a couple of turns they will be yours. Like a lot of the cards on this list, it's the instant board presence you get when you cast it. That's why it's so good and why it's in our number 4 slot. People don't see it coming, and it's just a great way of finishing a game off and bringing yourself back from behind at any point in the game, assuming you can cast it. At number 3, we have our second and final mono black card on the list. We have Torment of Hellfire. Torment of Hellfire is X black for a sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life, unless that opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So this card does a little bit of everything. It's a board wipe, it's a control card, because you're making your opponents discard cards, and it's a win condition because they're directly losing life because of the spell you cast. There are times when this card isn't as great, for example when they're playing a token strategy, but generally speaking, when you cast this, if X is 10, 12 plus, you have won the game. You just completely strip your opponents of all of their resources and a lot of their life as well. In mono black decks and in big ramp decks especially, this card is fantastic. And at only 2 black pips in its casting cost, it can be played in any deck that's playing black. So these last 2 cards do come with a tiny little bit of a warning. These cards will annoy the people you play against. They're top of the list because they're the strongest. They're also probably the least fun on the list. If you're that kind of player who likes them, by all means play them, but of any cards on the list you don't play that often, these would be the 2. So with that, let's jump in. So coming from Conspiracy 2, we have Expropriate. Expropriate is 7 blue for a sorcery. It's a card with Council's Dilemma. Starting with you, each player votes for time or money. For each time vote, take an extra turn after this one. For each money vote, choose a non-land permanent owned by the voter and gain control of it. Exile Expropriate. So this card is miserable to play against. It's on here because it's really, really powerful, and if you have one, play it every so often with the warning that your playgroup might not like you so much afterwards. The general play pattern is you vote for time so you get at least 1 extra turn. Depending on the overall board state, your opponents may be tempted to vote for time, but probably they should just be giving you their 1 best permanent. Why this card is so high up on this is because not only does it give you a board state by giving you your opponent's best permanents, it also gives you the extra turns to use them. You're not casting this big spell and then waiting for it to come around to you before you can attack and win. If an opponent is very attached to their permanent and doesn't want to give you it and gives you an extra turn, that's just an extra card you draw. It's an extra turn to hit them with the other things they give you. So if you haven't played with this card, consider playing with it, maybe. Play it once or twice. I don't run this one anymore personally, but I cannot fault anyone who does just because of how good it is. So moving on to our number 1 spot, we have a card which I think has won more games of Magic than any other single card on this list. I've seen this card take players from stone cold last, nothing on the board, to win immediately. That card is Insurrection. Insurrection is 5 red for a sorcery. Untap all creatures and gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste until end of turn. To me, this is the epitome of a Haymaker. You're in a game of Commander, you're down, you're out, you haven't really done anything the last couple of turns, there's been some board wipes, everyone else has recovered, you've got nothing. You top deck Insurrection. You probably win then and there. You take everyone's creatures and you hit them for a ton of damage. If you can't kill everyone, you're probably killing the person who is winning, which may make them slightly salty, which is why, again, like Expropriate, this comes with the warning more than the others. But this card alone is responsible for so many games of Commander ending, it has to be in my number 1. So thank you everyone, that was my list. One quick thing before we get out of here. I would highly recommend, if you can, mix up your Haymakers. Don't play Insurrection in every deck with red. Don't play Expropriate in every deck with blue. Put them in 1 deck at a time, that kind of thing. The reason being, these cards win games of Commander. Your playgroup and your friends and your opponents might get a bit salty and a bit annoyed at you if you Insurrection them 5 games in a row, as it were. That still doesn't mean I don't think you should consider playing these cards on the list. They are a ton of fun, they're really swingy, Haymaker, and it's always fun to just play something big and stupid. And with that, thank you very much everyone for watching. Comment below if you think I've missed anything, if there's anything you would like to see on another list. Ooh, part 2 maybe, perhaps. But until next time, thank you very much, and goodbye.